So hello everyone, and I was thinking the other day, I haven't made a this is what I've made all about the mock video for a while. I've been largely concentrating on videos from Lego shows, so I thought I would do a 2 for the price of 1, and I would talk about 2 mocks that I made towards the end of 2024 and the beginning of 2025, and that is this locomotive here, which is the GNR, Great Northern Railway Class G, otherwise known as a Stirling Single. And then I had to make some coaches to go with it, or I really needed some coaches to go with it. So I made some twin articulated coaches, a twin articulated set from also the Great Northern Railway. This locomotive was originally designed and built from about 1870. This twin articulated set of coaches was from about 1915. So it's just about conceivable that they might have run about the same time. Okay, let's look at each in detail. So here we are. This is the Stirling Single, and this was a bit of a challenge to make, I'll be honest. So the challenging part was all about the wheel arrangement. So here we've got the 4 wheels in the leading bogie, then we've got the big 8-foot driving wheel, and then you've got a trailing wheel at the back. And trying to work out how I was going to get that to work and go around R40s and other Lego curves was quite tricky. So what I've ended up doing is that the front wheel here is blind, then we've got a flanged wheel here and a flanged wheel there. And this is also a flanged wheel, but it's articulated. So you might be able to see that there's a bit of movement there because that is articulated. The next challenge was the drive. Now I thought I might be asking for lots and lots of trouble were I to try and make this run just using the larger driving wheel. And even if I decided to use the larger driving wheel on one of the other wheels on the locomotives, then we've got issues with gearing and getting the ratios right. And I thought that is going to be a lot of trouble. So what I decided to do was actually use a standard Lego train motor in the tender. So this is a tender driven locomotive, and the motor is currently driving these back 2 wheels. And if you look at the tender, you'll actually see that this front set of wheels here also is articulated. And that means that because you've got the 6 wheels here, this will also go around R40 curves. I should say when I originally built this, I had this the other way around. So I had the motor here at the front and the rear set was articulated as well. But then what was tending to happen was that because the centre of gravity of the tender is kind of towards the back, this was lifting up at the front and it was derailing when it went around switches and it went through points. So I had to have a bit of a rethink there, and some useful conversations with Andrew Harvey helped me to think about that and come up with an alternative. There are restrictions about where I could place the motor here because of the way that it is attached to the tender body. Having these outside frames here means that the way these are attached to the motor, we do have studs at about this level. So it wasn't an option to actually have the motor pivoting as a kind of bogie here. It has to be fixed to the top of the tender body, or else put it up another plate, which would have made it look even more odd. So the reason I built a Stirling Single is one of the, I think, one of the most beautiful locomotives or steam locomotives in the world, and it's always been a favourite when we've been to the National Railway Museum. It's also, if you follow the Reverend Awdry's Railway series, it's also Emily. And Emily is the name of my daughter, my first child, so there's a bit of a connection there as well. And it's one of my wife's favourite locomotives too, so how could I not make it? The genesis of it really was probably an idea for how to do this splasher here using 2x1 plates. And then it was a case of kind of getting the scale right, getting everything else to fit around it. There was a lot of backing and forwards, going backwards and forwards, trying to get these wheel spacings to look right and things to kind of work right from that point of view. The tender, which looks huge, is actually pretty tall in real life as well. I'll drop a photo in to show you kind of how it looks. So it is that tall. When this was in the National Collection, they did have a slightly shorter tender in, but it wasn't contemporaneous with the locomotive, and now they've restored an old GNR tender, and that's how it looks. So that's why we've got that in there as well. I've put a bit of detail in the cab. Gotta love a bit of detail in the cab, so I've taken the little driver out. There's just about room for a fireman, so I've put, you know, a regulator in there as well. Even managed to try and squeeze in a teeny tiny gauge glass as well as some other things. So there we go. There is the Stirling Single. Moving on to the coaches, I wanted to make something that could both look reasonable running behind the Stirling Single, but also behind our LNER A4 Mallard. And so something which was kind of Gresley designed or Gresley era and in teak was the order of the day. And I was looking through a book that I bought for this purpose, and here it is, Gresley's Coaches. Very, very useful book. I was quite taken with the idea of Gresley's innovation in going with articulation in coaches, and I wanted to build an articulated set of coaches. Now, the other thing I quite liked about Gresley's coaches is the bow ends. So these have got bow ends, but a lot of the articulated coaches that Gresley produced didn't have the bow ends. We just had these kind of hard, very straight ends, and trying to find something which had that magic combination of articulation and the bow ends was quite tricky. However, in looking through the book, I managed to come across this set of coaches here, which are before the grouping into the big four. They are Great Northern Railway coaches, and it is an articulated twin. So that kind of met the criteria of not too huge an investment in Lego parts, but also something that had the kind of interesting features that I wanted to try and get into my coaches. So what have we got? Well, the front here is a composite. It's a third and first class composite corridor. So we've got the corridor side here, and then the back is a brake open third. So there's an open third section, and then there's a brake section. The other thing I should say that I really wanted to do was to try and do an interior. I do like having an interior in my coaches, as you'll have seen if you've looked at the Intercity 125 or the HST videos. If you haven't, go and check those out. So I'm going to take the camera off the tripod and we'll have a look inside. So let's have a little look inside. I've loosened these off a bit actually, but the roof panels come off in the middle sections there. There is a bit of unusual use of parts here just to get a half plate gap, which means that these nicely line up. At the top there you get a nice curve. We'll start with the composite. So I knew from the Gresley book that this had 3 first class compartments, which are here. I managed to squeeze these in by having 2 minifig seats back to back. You can see that in there. And then using plates to create the divisions between the compartments above. So first class had dark blue seating, as my book lets me know. And then we've got the third class, which had a combination of red and black maquette on the seats. So I've used dark red here. And so we've got 2 full compartments and then one with just 1 seat in as the half compartment. Now, I had to exercise a bit of imagination here to work out what the layout would be inside. I knew from the Gresley book that it was 3 first class and 2.5 third class, but I've decided that I will add some teeny tiny toilets at the end as well. Hopefully you can just about see that in there. It's a bit dark. And there's another one down here as well. Then we move over to the brake open third. So we've got the open third part of the coach, which was relatively straightforward after all the complications of producing the compartments here. And then we've got a brake compartment and a kind of goods and package compartment at the back there with our 2 ducats at the back for the guard to be able to see what's going on down the coach. A couple of things to point out here. Although these coaches are teak, the closest Lego colour to them is dark orange, but I haven't used dark orange all the way through, because actually if you look at examples of teak coaches, they're obviously not one single uniform colour. What you do have is a kind of different variations in the way that the wood has aged over time. So that, combined with parts availability, actually has meant that I've actually used a combination of dark orange and reddish brown to give that effect. The other thing I wanted to do was just to give just enough lining to simulate what there is on actual teak coaches. So I've used some yellow trimline tape to create these boxes as we go along, and some custom stickers that I designed as well, based on what I could see in the photograph from the Gresley book. One last thing to note here is the corridor connection, which I don't know if you can see, I've managed to get to be just one plate width between the two corridor connections. And when I first built this, I had corridor connections which were a full 4 studs wide, and they had nice curved corners and everything, but when it was going around corners and around switches, they were catching. Reducing that just to a central portion at 2 studs wide means that they do nicely pass each other when they go around corners, and I don't have that problem. It's not quite as accurate to the original prototype, but when you look at it from the side, it looks pretty good. The other thing to note is the way that I managed to get this to go around R40s, which it does. It's all about where you put the pivot points for this bogey. So I borrowed a trick from a 00 set that I found on eBay, and looked at the images there. And actually what you do is you put the pivot point quite far back. So you can see that the pivot point is all the way out there. And that means that when you get to a corner and you get to a curve, these the coaches kind of swing past each other rather than collide into each other. And of course that's not going to go back in. Get in. There we go. So this is the side that I had to exercise a bit of thinking to try and work out how it might look, because it's not shown in the photograph. So the easier half of the articulated twin is the break open third, because I just did pretty much a mirror image of what's on the other side. The more tricky one is the composite here. So obviously on the other side we've got the corridor side, but this is the compartment side, and I knew from Gresley's coach's book that we've got 2.5 third class compartments and then 3 first class compartments. So looking at sort of contemporaneous coaches of around this period, came up with this idea of the doors as they are here. And then I've pushed the boat out a bit and thought about having toilets as well, so these would be 2 toilet areas here and here. Okay, so I hope you've liked that little bit of a whistle-stop tour of 2 recent mocks, 2 recent builds. I will drop some footage at the end of this video of it going around some layouts at LEGO shows. The other thing you might be interested in is how I go about designing these models. I tend not to go directly into something like Studio. I tend to work things out in the brick. I tend to do a lot of drawing. I've got a little sketchbook that I use. I go from photographs I find in books, photographs I find online. I use drawing to try and work out the shapes of things, to work out the proportions of things as well, and then go backwards and forwards between little test builds in the brick and actually putting things together completely in Studio. So of these 2 models, for instance, there's only the tender and the twin articulated set, which I do have complete Studio models for. The locomotive part of the Stirling Single, I did 1 or 2 things to get the spacing of the wheels right in Studio, but then a lot of it was just done in the brick. Okay, hope you enjoyed that. Do leave us a comment or subscribe if you'd like to see more of this kind of thing and hear me rambling on about things that I've made, and hopefully see you at a show soon.